Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to our special Geopolitics Today event entitled Chessboard Dynamics, Strategic Rivalries in the Indo-Pacific. Some housekeeping before we start. Please leave your microphone on mute and your cell phones on silent as a courtesy to our moderator and speakers. If you have any questions, please file them in the in-queue, and if necessary, who you would like to answer that question. I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge our dignitaries who are present. Her Excellency Philippines Ambassador Kera Azu Sina, Councillor of the Royal Embassy of Cambodia, Mr. Lim Sambath, First Secretary of the Fijian High Commission, Ms. Malana Baba, Malawi Member of Parliament, the Honourable Joyce Chitsulu, Bhutan Member of Parliament, the Honourable Nima, and Tibetan Member of Parliament, the Honourable Tenzing Doreng. And to everyone else, a warm welcome. Now, please let me introduce our speakers and moderator. Professor Maman Chen, former Deputy Representative, Taipei Economic and Cultural Centre in New Delhi, Professor and Vice Dean, College of Law and Politics at National Chung Hsing University in Taiwan. Professor Stephen Nagy, who is based at the International Christian University in Tokyo. And Dr. Patricia Schneider, Political Advisor of the Chief of the German Navy. And finally, our moderator for the event, ABSI patron, Professor Anita Abbott, who is also the chair of the Centre of Advanced Research and Invitation and a professor in International Relations and Cultural Diplomacy at Charisma University. Professor Abbott, the floor is yours to start the discussion. Thank you.
Chessboard dynamic strategic competition and cooperation in the Indo-Pacific. It will be interesting and interactive session. As we know, the Indo-Pacific has emerged as a key arena for global strategic competition that involved the United States and China in maintaining regional dominance and influence, and also regional powers such as India, Australia, Japan, and South Korea play pivotal roles. And there are several dynamics and interaction that we are going to address today in 1 hour. The first is on Taiwan Strait crisis. Yes, it is sensitive matter, but it is significant as well because it has implication on the regional stability. As we know, Taiwan also has strategic importance. So control over Taiwan would give China greater access to the Pacific Ocean, and this means the United States and regional allies such as South Korea and Japan will see this as a threat. And China's increasing or assertive stance in the South China Sea also has led some members of the EU and NATO to develop the Indo-Pacific security strategies, such as Germany, Italy, Spain, France, the United Kingdom. It is evident in GCAP and FCAS. And of course, this will lead to new counter alliances to counter growing military ties, cooperation between those between European countries and Japan, or between Germany and the Philippines. So the involvement of the Europeans in Asian defense security matters mark the significant shift in global security dynamics. For this session, we will have three outstanding speakers from Taiwan, Professor Maman Chen, and from Japan, Professor Nagy, and from Germany, Dr. Schneider. please note, this is not. This is about the dynamics and interactions in the area, in the Indo-Pacific. It will be and the implication on regional stability. We are not going to talk about asymmetric warfare strategies, for instance, because we only have 1 hour. So for the first question, I have one opening question for each speaker. The first question is for Professor Chen. He is the expert on regional security and strategic studies with Taiwan as the focus. So the question is, Taiwan remains a central flashpoint in the Indo-Pacific, particularly in the context of rising US-China tensions. How do you assess the current security dynamics surrounding Taiwan, and what are the potential implications of a military escalation or continued strategic competition for the broader Indo-Pacific regions? Professor Chen, the floor is yours.
So how much time do I have to speak on this question? 10 minutes. Okay, I try. Okay. Here is Taipei, and I wonder if you see the news today that China started another round of military exercise around Taiwan this morning. Yeah, but right now I'm in the cafe in Taipei, and you could see that the people around me, no one is panic. That people seeing that that China is doing it again. People are not fleeing, people are not panic. We just live our life as normal. And the reason China started military exercise around Taiwan is because last Thursday, October 10th, was Taiwan's National Day, October 10th. And every year when we have like a national day, we have a presidential election, we have an election, China would do things like that to intimidate the people on Taiwan. And actually, the situation around Taiwan, it become more tense in recent years. And China's threat on Taiwan also increased. In recent years, we see that China does not just show its threat orally. It also conduct a lot of the military exercises, military drills, missile launching tests around Taiwan. And you could see this from different perspectives. Why China did this to Taiwan? Of course, we know that the main reason China did this is that they refused to recognize Taiwan as a sovereign state. And in the past 70 years, Taiwan has existed as an independent, autonomous, sovereign state. But China refused to recognize that. They think that Taiwan is a renegade province, should be reunified with the motherland, like Hong Kong and Macau did in 1997 and 1999. Okay. But the people on Taiwan see Taiwan and China are two different societies, two different countries. And of course, we never want to be China's enemy. We always want to maintain good relations with China. Myself, born in Taiwan, I also visit China many times. I also had a lot of friends, even relatives there. Okay, this is about Taiwan-China relations. But the broader aspect to see the issue is that the security environment of the region has changed dramatically in the past 10 or 20 years. 20 years ago, I would say, in around 2000 or earlier, even people were talking about China's threat. but very few people took it seriously. The main reason is that China was not a big aggressive military power. Actually, at the time, China's foreign policies or their behavior on the international societies were quite moderate. You saw China, after the Deng Xiaoping launched the economic reform in 1979. For first 30, 40 years, everybody went to China, do business, give them all kinds of help. And Chinese society also, developed tremendously. The economic, scientific, people's life, everything changed. But the biggest difference is when Xi Jinping became leader of China, and the foreign policies under Xi and became quite different. That China shows more ambition. That they no longer see that like keeping Taiwan over there intact is a good option. They want to be more active in incorporating Taiwan. And the most important thing in China's foreign policy is that the competition between China and the US became more tense. When I say competition, it's a military competition, strategic competition. And in Taiwan, or you see in this region, in the past 70, 80 years, the security and the peace over here has been maintained by US strategic predominance over here. Actually, Taiwan and the U.S. does not have a diplomatic relations. U.S. government doesn't recognize Taiwan as a sovereign state. But the U.S. position is to commit peace and security of Taiwan and also the region. And so in the past 30 years, you see that there was a delicate strategic balancing between US, Taiwan, and also China. And this is a situation we call the status quo. And status quo means that Taiwan, even we are an independent country, but we do not seek formal independence. And China, even they consider Taiwan as part of China, but they do not really challenge, Taiwan's existence. And the U.S. Even they say that they say they want to maintain status quo in the Taiwan Strait, means that they don't support Taiwan independence, but they don't support China using military means to reunify Taiwan. So this is a balancing situation for the past decades. But once China began challenging this, the situation become totally different. So back to what I said in the beginning, I say that the situation in Taiwan, we could talk from different perspectives. From Taiwanese society or from Taiwanese public perspective, we see that we want to maintain good relation with China, and actually Taiwan's economic relation with China has been very close. Yeah, China is Taiwan's largest trade partner, and a lot of Taiwanese people went to China doing business, and also we had a lot of investments over there. And but on the other hand, because China saying that Taiwan should abandon, our idea, saying that we are independent. We should rejoin China like Hong Kong or Macau, which we cannot accept. But I think that if you look at from a larger strategic perspective, China does not care much about what Taiwanese people are thinking. They're always saying that the current situation, that the Taiwanese people want maintain our ways of life, want to maintain our autonomy, want to keep our independence, want to embrace our democracy, is because the U.S. is behind all of this. They think that the Taiwan Strait is a flashpoint for U.S.-China strategic competition. And because the U.S. Has been here for past decades, and the U.S. They maintain the security and also the stability of the region through different bilateral security treaties. One is with Japan. U.S.-Japan Security Treaty, I think since the 1960s, has been the very, very important security alliance in East Asia. And the U.S. also had security treaties with South Korea, with the Philippines, and with other countries in the region. So even over here in East Asia, we do not have international military alliances like in Europe. You have a NATO. But through these bilateral security treaties, U.S. Has been able to maintain the stability of the entire region. So right now, China is challenging U.S. Supremacy. U.S. is challenging U.S. position over here. It triggers a lot of tension, not just between U.S. and China, but also between China and Japan, China and the Philippines, and of course, China and Taiwan. So what can we do right now? And I would say that all these problems we see today, U.S., no, not U.S., it would be China. China should, I would say, be more responsible for the situation we see right now. First, I think nobody in Taiwan or nobody in East Asia will oppose China become a great power. China could become a great power economically, scientifically, but being a great power doesn't mean that you have to you have to challenge the existing political and security order of the region. And particularly China ignore one thing is that the U.S. supremacy over here is actually welcome by the people over here. In many continents that the U.S. or Western countries, their roles are sometimes being criticized or challenged. But here you come to Taiwan, or if you are in Japan, in Philippines, in Korea, you see that the current political order that we see today are accepted and welcome and supported by the governments and the people over here. Of course, we don't want to see a more, severely military clash between the U.S. and China, because it will be a very devastating effects to the people over Taiwan. Yeah, of course, we don't want to see war, and we still hope that China and the U.S. could have more dialogue. They could both work together to maintain security and peace of the region. But one more thing, the most important thing is that they have to take Taiwan's people's welfare and the rights into consideration. And this is a democratic society, high tech and highly developed, and people enjoy lives. And so I think that maintaining security is the common interest for all people, and nobody, including China, could challenge that. I hope that this brief introduction answered the question. So I'll stop here. Thank you.
We have several questions, and later, after the third speakers, you will be able to answer the questions. And for the next speaker, Professor Naji, he's the expert on regional security and strategic studies, and the focus is on Japan and regional powers. Japan, along with other regional powers like Australia and India, is playing an increasingly active role in shaping Indo-Pacific security architecture, particularly through mechanisms like the Quad and partnership with the United States. How do you view Japan's evolving strategic role in the region? And how are other regional powers positioning themselves amid US-China competition. Professor Najim, the floor is yours.
Putting today's discussion together. This is a great question, but I think it's a very important point to build on Professor Chen's point, is that the region, China's regional partners, welcome the United States. They look for a strong and stable and responsible China, and they want to continue to engage in this bilateral relationship. Japan is no different. In 2023, they had $380 billion of bilateral trade. And that trade relationship was by and large equal. There's more than 20,000 small and medium-sized businesses in China. If we talk about decoupling from China, frankly, there's no place to decouple to. And with that, I think Japan is very much representative of South Korea, Taiwan, Southeast Asian countries, as well as India. So as Japan is thinking about shaping its regional architecture and working with partners such as India, Australia, Southeast Asian countries, South Korea, Canada, where I'm from, as well as the United States, it's finding a way to balance the relationships, the security challenges that come with China, but also the economic opportunities that are clearly evident from the bilateral relationship. So how is Japan shaping the regional architecture? I argue that Japan acts as an international adapter middle power, where it's connecting like-minded countries and non-like-minded countries. It connects the various mini-lateral relationships to each other to bring legitimacy and to help function as a bridge or an interpreter to the region. We have Japan working very closely with ASEAN and being one of the biggest FDI providers to ASEAN. At the same time, it's a core member in the quadrilateral security dialogue. We see Japan working with the United States very closely in the US-Japan alliance, while at the same time building new partnerships in various minilateral formulas, such as the Japan-US-Philippine partnership, the Squad with the Philippines, Japan, Australia, and the United States. We also see Japan working to deal with some of the security challenges in Northeast Asia with North Korea by working with South Korea, Japan, and the United States. So Japan is an interesting partner because at the security level, it has numerous kinds of formulas of cooperation that it engages with. And I commonly understand it as the US-Japan alliance, its minilateral partnerships, such as the Quad, the reciprocal access agreements with Australia, the UK, and the Philippines. And then it has another layer of cooperation that comes in the form of trade agreements. Japan has signed a trade agreement with the EU called the Japan Economic Partnership Agreement that helps bring in those stakeholders into the region. We see Japan working with China on the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership. And we see Japan working within the Comprehensive Progressive Trans-Pacific Partnership, again, to create another layer of insulation to shape the region's development. Lastly, and I think importantly and more contemporarily, is Japan working with the IP4 countries, that's the Indo-Pacific 4 countries, such as New Zealand, Australia, South Korea, and of course, Japan, working with within NATO to try and build some inter-regional cooperation. Now, we should be clear, NATO is a geographically specific organization, but the challenges that Japan would like to work with really focus on disinformation, the cyber domain, and other areas that really aren't geographically specific. And what's interesting here is Japan's thinking about how it can work with like-minded partners and political entities like Taiwan. Taiwan's at the forefront of disinformation and cyber challenges within the region. And I'm not saying working with Taiwan at a state-to-state level. I can continue to advocate personally and in my analysis that they're working at a non-state level because Taiwan is such a critical actor in helping to teach us how to deal with the challenges of cybersecurity and disinformation within the region. Here, Japan is working with Taiwan, most likely South Korea, the United States, and other partners to focus on identification of disinformation, mitigation of disinformation, combating disinformation, and of course, vaccinating our societies against disinformation through education programs and literacy programs. Here, NATO is a critical partner as well because they're on the forefront of disinformation campaigns in the Eastern European front that emanate from Russia. So we see a connectivity of war or connectivity of conflicts where something happening in another part of the world affects this part of the world. And as we think about Japan's role, again, as that international adapter middle power, connecting like-minded and unlike-minded states, connecting different theaters of conflict, not only in the hard security areas, but also in trade and shaping trade rules, but also thinking about how we can cooperate on those areas of conflict that are very active, but we don't see them in disinformation and cybersecurity. How does it work with some key partners that you've mentioned? Again, Japan is thinking about distributing the burden of cooperation into different sub-regions. The Indo-Pacific region is vast. So the best way to, for example, to deal with North Korea, sanctions invasions, and denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula is to work with the United States and South Korea. When we think about the challenges across the Taiwan Strait and maintaining the status quo de jure with Taiwan, obviously we need to internationalize the issue, and that's what Japan has done, internationalize Taiwan as a global public good or as an international public good. Simply, what happens to Taiwan matters to the global economy and the global community, not just because Taiwan's a vibrant democracy with an open and free civil society, as Professor Chen mentioned, but it's a critical partner in sea lines of communication that really ferry about 5.5 trillion US dollars of trade in and around the Taiwan Straits. Taiwan's also critical in our semiconductor supply chains. If there is a conflict across the Taiwan Strait, there will be a bottleneck in semiconductors that will affect the global economy. Again, just where I'm from, Canada, those semiconductors that go into our automobile industries and our technology industries would obviously be disrupted. And that disruption would cause the unemployment of hundreds of thousands of Canadians. So what happens to Taiwan matters. And this is why I think Japan has taken an approach by working with other Indo-Pacific partners to try and internationalize Taiwan as an international public good. And this is where we've seen it use diplomacy within the G7, within NATO IP4 arrangements, as well as including Taiwan in the trilateral Camp David Principles Agreement between the United States, Japan, and South Korea to try and create a consensus about some of the critical challenges within the region. Another area that I think is important is, of course, the South China Sea. The South China Sea is really a cauldron of instability, and Japan is trying to add value to the region, again, not just through naval ships and missiles and doubling its defense spending by 2027. It's investing in infrastructure and connectivity in Southeast Asia. It's investing in development. It's investing in providing these countries the tools, in particular maritime domain awareness capabilities, bolstering their Coast Guard vessel capabilities, and enhancing their human capacity. That means the training of each country's Coast Guard officials and troops, but also their militaries, so that they can deal with the challenges within the South China Sea by themselves. So Japan's approach, again, is almost like a lasagna or a lattice. It has that base based on the US-Japan alliance. It has many minilateral partnerships, including the Quad, minilateral relationships. Then it has an economic layer, a development layer, and then it's using diplomacy at the international level to internationalize many of the security challenges within the region. So whether it's Europe, South America, North America, or other regions, look to the Indo-Pacific region and understand that what happens in the region matters to them, and that means they have to invest their diplomatic resources within the region to try and discourage assertive behavior by some countries within the region. I'll stop there. Thank you again for the opportunity.
well, a lot of prominent scholars here, as well as distinguished journalists, Dr. Eddie, Roger, and the board, of course, and Professor Patrick, and I think there are many others, and Commander Lee. So I'm sure, and also General Diela. So I encourage you all to ask questions and write the questions in the chat box. So for the third speakers, Dr. Snyder, we have a question for you. European countries, especially Germany, have been gradually increasing their engagement in the Indo-Pacific with concern supply chain resilience, freedom of navigation, and the influence of China. From your perspective, how do European countries, particularly Germany, balance their economic interests with the strategic imperative in the region? And what role do you see Europe playing in the Indo-Pacific geopolitical landscape? Dr. Snyder, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Dear Anita, thank you very much for the question and for inviting me here. Hello to all of you. Let me do my statement twofold. Let me first explain what the German Navy is currently doing in the Indo-Pacific, and then I want to make an argument that I don't see a contradiction between balancing the strategic and economic interests in the region, but that certainly balancing them is a challenging field. So what is the German Navy doing currently in the Pacific? The German Navy's approach is regionally rooted and globally committed. This is because we learned that despite all refocusing on national and collective defense, for Germany it remains essential to maintain a global perspective too. I fully agree to what Stephen has said before, that we have critical partners in the region, especially Taiwan and Japan, but also many other strategic partners we do have there. And that we are, that in the globalized world we are living in, the developments in the maritime sphere are not limited to specific geographic areas, rather that they are interconnected and that they influence each other. So, for example, the whole topic of secure sea lines, secure and safe sea lines of communication for us is not only a matter of the freedom of navigation in the Baltic or the Red Sea, but also in the Indo-Pacific, and all is interconnected. So consequently, it's not without reason that this year's Indo-Pacific deployment of the German Navy consists of two ships, the frigate Baden-Württemberg and the combat support ship Frankfurt am Main. They are currently in Singapore at the moment, and they will head out to Malaysia tomorrow. So the IPD-24 is a continuation of our very first German Navy deployment in the region in 2021 with the frigate Bayern. Maybe some of you remember this ship. And our visit and our tour this year is a visible proof of our persistence and our interest and our lasting commitment to the region. And we have seen this in practice only a few weeks ago in the Taiwan Strait, as our defense minister stated, international waters are international waters, so we are going through. And that's what the Navy did, calmly and professional, as they do every day at sea. And we did this in company with many navies, just to mention a few recent examples, like Japan, like Australia or New Zealand just recently did. Germany wants to play a more active role in supporting the rules-based international order in the Indo-Pacific. And the core elements are the contribution to the UN embargo against North Korea, the participation in various exercises For example, in the largest maritime exercise, Rim of the Pacific, RIMPAC, the transit through the South China Sea, according to UNCLOS, and exercises with our regional partners in Southeast Asia, as well as port visit along the route. We received a lot of positive feedback from our partner nations and navies in the regions, and that's why we came back, and that's why we think that we are on the right track with our approach. So regarding your questions, as I said, I don't think it's the strategic interest and the economic interest are not a contradiction per se. So if you look at the strategic documents, Germany and the Europe published recently. In Germany, we had the national security strategy, our first one, and following shortly after that, our first national China strategy. And on the European level, we have the European Strategic Compass and the European Maritime Security Strategy. They all call for an engagement in the Pacific for the rights and freedoms according to UNCLOS. And they make clear that a military escalation would contradict European interests and values. So some instruments they name is defense diplomacy exercises and enhanced security cooperation overall. But you also see this balancing act in the relation towards China, which is defined threefold, at least by Germans. China's strategy. China is seen as an economic competitor, as a strategic rival, and as a partner, for example, and for the topic of climate change. So you see China is seen in different roles. Regarding the engagement of the European navies, I think even though they are mostly on national tasking, I think they complement each other very well. Everything, and I think the general theme is that everything what contributes to the stability of the region also contributes, also serves Europe and the trade interests of all partners. So we all have an interest that the sailors from all around the world can safely transit, that we have a flow of vital resources continuing, that we have a flow of goods between Asia and Europe and with the partners there. So the free trade is the basis for prosperity, not only for the countries in the Indo-Pacific, but also in Europe. And therefore, the stability is vital for all our countries. So I'm convinced that the oceans tie us together, and I'm looking forward to our further discussions. Thank you.
There are some questions. The first question is for Professor Chen. With regards to the United States strategic ambiguity, what concrete measures or actions should Taiwan take?
Okay, yeah. We know. Okay, yeah. Thank you for answering this, raising this question. I didn't talk about strategic ambiguity before. So-called the idea of strategic ambiguity means that the U.S. Commit to maintaining security of Taiwan without telling what kind of strategy it will adopt when a crisis arises. And in recent years, there have been a lot of discussions in Taiwan, also in the US, saying that because China is now becoming more aggressive and challenging the status quo, so US should adjust its position. And my answer is strategic ambiguity, the main purpose is to maintain a credible deterrence, preventing anyone from challenging the status quo. So, but if you make it clear that the U.S. will respond directly to any military attack against Taiwan, and some people would also say that this will also trigger the tension between both sides and making a war more inevitable. So I think that the U.S. should make it clear to all sides, saying that that the U.S. Will only respond when anyone challenge the status quo. So I think that we need more like a refined version of a strategic ambiguity. It's not to shift it from ambiguity to clarity, but to redefine the idea of a U.S. position in this region. And of course, in East Asia, it's very unrealistic to talk about a nuclear, war. Impossible. It will be a big disaster for everyone over here. And but I think that the U.S. Strategic ambiguity should also include that how to encourage China to have a dialogue with Taiwan. Right now, the government between both sides, Taiwan and China, there's no official communication channels. We used to have that, and even U.S. Did not directly get involved into this communication between Taiwan and China. But I think that the U.S. could play a more positive role. So I think that the question is not whether U.S. should adjust the strategic ambiguity, but to how to make how to create a more reliable security mechanism in this region. This is my answer.
Much for that. There are so many other questions. Next question is from Brett Murphy. This is for Professor Naji and Professor Chen. Do you feel New Zealand could do more to support Taiwan and Japan, given our trade with China means more of a neutral stance? Possibly we can start with Professor Naji first.
Great, thank you very much. So I think the reality is that, New Zealand has a significant trading relationship with China, and that its economy is very dependent on that relationship. And as a result, it needs to negotiate and be nuanced in how it builds a strong partnership with Taiwan to enhance Taiwan's security and their shared values and shared institutions. I don't think it has to go into the security realm. I think that as we work and find ways to build crosswalks between New Zealand and Taiwan, that again, there's a lot of different ways to build more shared interests, increase the education exchanges, increase trade, finding ways to cooperate again in the areas of disinformation and cybersecurity, whether it's bilaterally or through the NATO IP4. There's a lot of opportunity for strengthening that relationship. And what's most important is that New Zealand understands its size and its economic relationship with China, and ensure that it doesn't become a victim to economic coercion like Taiwan, like Australia, like Canada, and many other countries. So it's going to require a nuanced approach to engagement that balances New Zealand's economic interests, but also its shared values with Taiwan.
That I think that Taiwan's importance in international relations. I think everybody knows that Taiwan play a positive role in in technologies and in economic development in many ways. And right now, if we do, if the other countries do not support Taiwan, this will only give China an excuse that whatever they do right now to intimidate the people and the government of Taiwan is accepted. And so I think that we do need a space. We do need to be treated equally, just like other countries in the world. So I think that economically, politically, scientifically, every kind of support of Taiwan is necessary. This is my answer.
This question is for Professor Naji. Is it better if Prime Minister Ishiba's proposal for a collective Asian security organization could be done with less confrontation if he did not use the NATO analogy? Professor Naji.
Thank you. So obviously I live in Asia, but I'm not Asian. So I think it's most important to listen to Asian voices. And when you visit Southeast Asia or you visit South Korea, you visit India, the idea of a NATO, Asian NATO is really something that it's just not there. But Prime Minister Ishiba did mention this idea of thinking about an Asian NATO. And I think it's putting it out there for us to think about what are some creative ways that we can add security to the region and use NATO perhaps as a basis or a learning opportunity to find an opportunity to create a security structure that meets the security challenges for the region. I don't think he was advocating for an Asian NATO, as understanding that the region is very heterogeneous. But I think what he was advocating is that we definitely need to strengthen the security architecture or update the security architecture so that it meets the challenges that we face within the region. We have a nuclearized Korean peninsula, and likely in the next 5 to 10 years, South Korea will acquire a nuclear deterrent. This is a big worry. How do we manage this, these dynamics? The Taiwan Strait relationship is becoming increasingly unstable. How do we protect Taiwan and its political system and the freedom of its people in an era where China is much more powerful and much more willing to use force? How do we manage the coordination of militaries between Russia and the Ukraine? This is a question that we didn't really face, or sorry, China and Russia, my apologies. We didn't face this question 20 years ago. So how do we think about this relationship? How do we think about the hybrid tactics that are being deployed to erode away the confidence and the abilities of the Philippines or Vietnam or Taiwan to maintain their national interests in their backyard? These are real questions that I don't think the present security architecture can deal with, but I don't think a NATO, Asian NATO can deal with either. So there is a real need to be rethinking about what are the new security formulas to bring in security capital to the region. One of the areas that many countries are involved in investing in is called minilateral partnerships. And I think this is a new way to be thinking about security, a smaller group of countries that provide some very regional specific security to the region. But it's not just security. If you look at the Japan, Philippines, US agreement that was signed in May 2024, it's not just maritime security. They understand Philippine security has to come from a strong economy, from being technologically advanced. We also have additional partners. The Canadians are coming in and providing dark vessel technology to help the Filipinos deal and identify usually Chinese ships that are engaged in illegal activities. So we don't have to have just traditional actors providing security to the region. We can have other formulas and other actors. So I think minilateral partnerships is really important. But again, going back to the example of Japan and its lasagna approach to security, it certainly isn't just boats and missiles. It has a very layered approach to bringing in other actors, using diplomacy, using trade, using development and infrastructure and connectivity to create a web of relationships that dissuade assertive states from engaging in assertive behavior in the way that I think China has done in the South China Sea, or China is doing today with its military drills in and around Taiwan. It's not just going to be missiles and deterrence. It's going to be a layered approach to security that includes, again, development, infrastructure connectivity, trade relationships and trade agreements, and internationalizing issues so that it matters to all countries, not just to the ones within the region.
Another question is from, wait a minute. There is a question that can be answered by one of the speakers, possibly Dr. Snyder's or Professor Chen or Professor Naji. The question is from retired Major General Hageman. Should the various bilateral security treaties be replaced by a collective security system? Is this idea imaginable, and is there a chance of realization? Dr. Snyder's or Professor Naji or Professor Chen?
Maybe I'll jump in. So I think we need to be a little bit more conscious of the dynamics within the region. And at the macro level, this makes sense. But remember, each country has their own domestic politics, and it may not be viable to form this collective security system because of the domestic politics. And I want to give you an example of South Korea. We're likely to see a progressive government come in South Korea in the next 2 years, replacing President Yoon. They're likely to throw out everything that he put into force over the past 3 years. That means the trilateral partnership with South Korea, Japan, and the US. They're likely to throw out their Indo-Pacific strategy. They're likely to minimize their engagement with Taiwan and focus on what they want to focus on, which is North Korea. So just looking at that one example, we may want a collective security act, but the different domestic constituents in South Korea may not find this useful. If you pivot to Southeast Asia, the Vietnamese are vehemently opposed to a collective security act. They prefer to balance China through a lot of different mechanisms. So before they welcomed Xi Jinping to Vietnam in January, they welcomed the President of the United States, the Vice President of the United States. They set up the Center of Disease Control in Hanoi. They signed an economic agreement with the European Union. They welcomed the US's, some US ships to Cam Ranh Bay. And they strengthened their partnership with Japan. So their approach to security is to bring in extra-regional partners, strengthen trade relationships before they deal with welcoming China into to Vietnam. The other Southeast Asian countries, except for the Philippines, are very, very hesitant in terms of collective security and really pushing the boundaries of security. So I think when we read the tea leaves of the region, it's very heterogeneous, and that the domestic politics in each country and their domestic political systems probably are not set up for a collective security system like we see in the EU or between the NATO members.
Mark Lee from for Dr. Snyder. What sustainment and logistic challenges do you see for the German Navy deploying further afield in the Indo-Pacific, and how can regional navies assist? Dr. Snyder?
Yes. So thank you for that question. So the first time we came in 2021, we came only with one ship, and what we learned is that it's much easier to sustain if you bring your own support ship. That means we came with a swimming fuel station, which is also a swimming supermarket, and the swimming hospital. And that also helped in the exercises we did, also give fuel to other nations or to treat wounded soldiers in the hospital. Of course, you still need replenishment and during the port calls, like we did in Canada, San Diego, Honolulu, Japan, South Korea, Philippines, Indonesia, Singapore. This was very helpful to have the right maritime situational awareness. We have our liaison officers at the Information Fusion Center in Singapore and at the Enforcement Coordination Cell in Japan, and we have a network of military attaches, and so everything worked well here. I don't see a big challenge here. Maybe regarding the other question regarding the situation in the Ukraine and how this could influence the situation in the Indo-Pacific. I think it's a common understanding that the outcome of the invasion of Russia in the Ukraine could also influence the calculus of China regarding their behavior, or let's say of all autocratic regimes and the use of force. So the support of the Ukraine is essential for us in this view, if we want to uphold this international agreed legal order. So, but then at the same time, we see that during the campaigning for elections, not only in the US but also in Europe, after these years, it's also a matter of budget and of campaigning. So we don't know how the support of the Ukraine will continue. At the moment, Germany is the second largest contributor and supporter of the Ukraine after the US. And of course, the Chinese-Russian limitless friendship does vary a lot. And the sanctions regime against Russia does not function as well. And other states intensified their trade relations with Russia instead. So we see that everything is connected again, also in the sense of narratives and disinformation, a point Stephen earlier argued. So we see often Chinese and Russian narratives going together and arguing and influencing other states, and that is also our the electorate in our states. So there is certainly a common interest in working there together to fight this. Thank you.
So we only have two more questions, short, brief answer. The first question is for Professor Najib, and the second question is for Dr. Snyder or Professor Chen. The question is from Gabriel. Gabriel is from Asia Times. Speaking of the international architecture in the Indo-Pacific, what is your take on non-Western international organizations such as SCO and BRICS? Do they offer genuine political and economic alternatives to the region's small and middle powers? Are they merely tools of Russian and Chinese foreign policy to further their interests? Are they legit competitors to establish an emerging international organization and blocs such as ASEAN, end quote. Professor Najib?
Thank you very much, Gabriel, for the great question. So I think the institutional design of these organizations are quite inclusive. And what that means is that you'll have some partners within the institutions that are actually not on the same page of the book. So if we look at the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, both Pakistan and India are in this organization. So India is interested in being in the organization because, of course, it doesn't want the Shanghai Cooperation Organization to evolve in a way that is anti-Indian or prejudices India's interests. So I think that the institutional design allows for the maximum number of participants, but at the same time, it prevents it from making consequential decisions because it's a consensus-based decision-making organization. So I think that it really can't provide a security alternative or an economic alternative or development alternative on any high-level politics. So in some ways, it's a little bit similar to ASEAN, where the barometer of cooperation is really the lowest denominator, right? What can they agree on? So I think that is really interesting. BRICS as well. I think that the BRICS members are not all aligned with China. Some see the importance of the United States, some value the US dollar as the international convertible currency, where others, again, would like to move away from these currencies. So the membership really creates problems in terms of consequential policies. And I think until they start to, they need to reshape the institutional design, or they start to really bring in consequential economies such as the US, Japan, South Korea, the European countries, that they won't offer the kind of attractiveness to really fundamentally compete with the current institutions that I do think add a lot of public good to our international communities. And however unequal the global north and global south is, the reality is the global north does provide a lot of public good in terms of aid, development, infrastructure, rule of law, helping contribute to international institutions that are really, really important for global stability. And without them, I think that we're going to be in a world where countries really are in a Machiavellian might is right approach, which is not good for the small and medium-sized countries that you mentioned.
Diela from Italy. There are two parts. The first part, possibly Dr. Snyder can answer this, and the second part is Professor Chen. The first part is, how do you think the Ukrainian crisis has affected the Asia-Pacific area? And then the second part is for Professor Chen. Is China looking at Ukraine to understand how the world could react to an invasion of Taiwan? Thank you. Dr. Snyder.
Speak for the Asian Pacific countries. I can just say that I think that this crisis just made more obvious that we have to strengthen our relations with our strategic partners, with the values partners, but also with the partners who do not share all our values, but are strategic partners because they also fight for the same international rules-based order. So that's why the security cooperation has enhanced here. Because also we see that the focus of the US has shifted even more to the Indo-Pacific. This obviously also influences the security of Europe and other regions of the world. And as long as we have Russia as the main opponent of the NATO countries at the moment, this binds all our forces here for national and collective defense. But as we see how Russia has relations to China, to Iran, to and getting ammunition from North Korea and so on, we see a big interconnectedness, and it's important to be active in all areas and to find partners to work with and to support each other. Thank you.
For China, I think that what happened in Ukraine is that they now know that it's difficult to defeat another small country, in a conventional warfare like this. So I think for Taiwan, what we have learned from the situation in Ukraine is that that how we can get well prepared in case an invasion occur in the Taiwan Strait. So I think to both sides, this is how to say, I have to use the word, it's a positive the influence that is both sides know that it's difficult to fight, and also for Taiwan, how we can get well prepared during the war.
Indeed, there are responses for the dynamics and interaction in the Indo-Pacific, and there could be more responses for these dynamics and interactions. This could be strategic balancing, wait and see approach, high involvement, and as Professor Naji mentioned earlier, with regard to the nuclear deterrence, the management of this dynamic is certainly formidable. There are still some other questions, but because of the time, we cannot answer those questions. So if you are still interested for the answers, you are welcome to contact the speakers, the panelists. And we also have the EPSI Summit on the 18th of November, this coming November. And we will discuss more this dynamics and interaction in the Indo-Pacific. I think session 1 will be about this. So once again, thank you very much for the speakers and the attendees, and I'm very glad we have ambassadors here, prominent scholars, and many others, and also distinguished journalists. Thank you for that, and hopefully we will see you in New Zealand at the summit. Thank you. Bye-bye.